Welcome to Pagan Coffee Talk. If you enjoy our content, please consider donating and following our socials. Now, here are your hosts, Lady Alba and Lord Knight.
Well, hello, Lord Lugh. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Hope you are.
I'm doing fine. I'm so glad to have you on here. I would like you to tell your history through craft.
Okay, well, that's going to be a mouthful. Well, way back in the day, in the 70s, I was a little church fella, and I went to church a lot. I had a really screwed up, dysfunctional family that I was raised in, and I went to the church seeking solace and peace. I got a little zealous. I ended up going to 3 different churches at once. I went to church Monday through Friday, once a day. I went to church twice on Saturday, and I went to church 3 times on Sunday. I was going to a Pentecostal church, an all-black fire-baptized holiness church, and I worked with and volunteered with a Bible deliverance evangelist that went town to town in tents and community centers and auditoriums. And so that's kind of where I got my spiritual start. I needed some kind of balance because my life was just in shambles. Even though I was just like 18, 19, 20 years old, I was just not in a good place. But that really helped me. It got me out of my comfort zone. I started in the Baptist church when I found the more what they called the full gospel church.
Yeah.
Became more of an experience, not just showing up for church.
Right.
That part intrigued me. The more I studied, though, the more I got involved and become more aware of church history, then it kind of scared me away. I thought, well, most people don't know so much of the history of the church. How they decided when Jesus was born, how they decided when they would celebrate his holy day or whatever. It was so
Right.
it either had pagan undertones or it was just downright a lie, either way. And then when I got to studying and realizing that I didn't know anybody that followed the teachings of Jesus. Everybody I knew followed the teachings of Paul, who wrote most of the New Testament. And I thought, well, I'm not going to be a Christian. I'm going to be a Paulist if I'm going to be anything. But the more I studied about Paul, I thought, oh, my God, he was a piece of work, too.
Yes,
So
it was.
I began looking elsewhere. I had a cousin that was also in the church, and he and his wife and me and my wife, Barbara, decided we were going to go on a mission to try to find some spiritual truth that was not mired up in the hidden history of the church that we were all a part of. And so we began, in our only way of knowing how to deal with spiritual issues, we prayed. And we openly said, I don't know who I'm praying to, but if there is a creative force, I need guidance. And so that was what we did. And we prayed and we meditated, and things were starting to be revealed. Of course, this was before the internet. This was in 82.
Right.
It was before the internet, and you couldn't just go to the library and pick up a book on Wicca. And if you picked up something, it was from the perspective of the church.
Yes.
And you couldn't hardly find anything even in the stores other than like tarot and astrology and, stuff that was older practices, but not religion-based.
Right.
And so, but we kept praying, we kept asking for guidance, and we were encouraged to create sacred space and create a circle and do our magical workings or our prayers or whatever we were doing, because we didn't know what we were doing, but we were going to do it there. And
Right.
because of that, we called it Circle of Light, because we created the circle and we sought the light. We were self-taught, but more than that, I guess we were spirit-taught. And so we just kind of did our thing, me and Barbara and my cousin Ricky and his wife Nancy. And it worked well. When we did stuff, it happened.
Right.
We decided, well, first of all, we didn't know anything about no Law of Three, no Wiccan Reed, never even heard of Wicca. And so we were just kind of messing around, and we decided that we wanted to do a spell. And the reason we wanted to do a spell, because we wanted to buy a big old house so we could all live together. And so we went to this random house, and we said, oh my God, that's a wonderful house. Let's live there. And so we parked the car on the side of the road, and we walked up in the yard, and we picked up a couple of little rocks, 2 or 3 acorns and sticks. We took them home. We put it on our little makeshift altar. This was it was on the weekend. I don't remember the actual date. And within a week from doing it, we were moving in. And this was a house that had 3 families living in it. It was a huge 16-room house. It used to be a boarding house for the teachers of Parker High School in Greenville. And we moved in. They give us a rent for $60. We were very surprised that we got to come in like that, but that's how it worked. And we created a little 2 ritual rooms, one for me and Barbara, one for him and his wife. But we practiced together. We did magic together. Eventually, we closed Circle of Light, and me and Barbara moved out. And they were having some family issues. They ended up splitting up. So we kind of went on our own way. Later, we got involved with Lord Men and Gwydion Foxfire, and we created a coven with them called United Fellowship. And that was based on what we already knew. And we began taking the Gavin and Yvonne Frost witchcraft course from correspondence in the back of an old, I think it was like a detective magazine or a crime magazine.
I remember Lord Men saying something about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I found it in the back of something.
Right. Some kind of old magazine. There used to be romance magazines, detective magazines, and crime magazines. And they will always have an article about the Frost, an ad, since the 60s.
Yeah.
Anyway, we decided we were going to charter and actually have a church. At the time, there was a representative from North Carolina, Jesse Helms, who was trying to get a bill passed through Congress that no one that was involved in an occult religion would be allowed to be considered a religion. It couldn't be tax exempt. It couldn't be acknowledged as a real path. Eventually, that got knocked down, and he kind of lost all his momentum. And they made the decision and announced it on the news on Samhain, which I thought was absolutely hilarious. When we incorporated, because of what was going on, we didn't want to say that it was a Wiccan church because we knew that we wouldn't be accepted if that passed through. So the charter we got, we didn't lie. We just kind of give it to them what they could understand.
Okay.
We said that we practiced and believed in the way that Jesus taught, but not necessarily Paul. And that the only thing that Paul ever said that supported us was that 1 Corinthians chapter 12, I think it is, it talks about the gifts of the Spirit. And the gifts of the Spirit are basically the same thing witches do. And so that's what we said, that we practice those 1 Corinthians chapter 12 gifts of the Spirit. And it passed, and we got our charter. It wasn't officially a Wiccan church, but we were trying to cover our basis and stay within the legality of it. So we did incorporate. We were studying their correspondence course from the Frost through the mail, but later we found that all those lessons were in a book called The Witch's Bible, and getting more understanding and more connected with community outside of the area here, realized that there was a big stink stirred over them calling their book The Witch's Bible as if it was the only way. But that's where we started, and we got involved in that. We did not kick out the beliefs and practices we had. We still, used them and connected with them, and we just kind of made it more eclectic in what we practiced. I guess this was in the mid-'80s. Our first practice was in 82. So the Frost, I think that was in the mid-'80s. Then come the 90s. And in the 90s, we connected with a group called Raven's Cry Temple. And it was meeting at a local First Greenville's only and First Pagan bookstore at that time, Rainbows and Moonbeams. And so they started having crystal awareness classes, which ended up drawing a lot of people that were interested in pagan studies. And the leader of the group at that time decided he would start having coven meetings or coven classes or whatever. And when he did, he invited us to come, and we did, and it was okay, but it was kind of confusing. First of all, we had never heard of Wicca. We had never heard of British traditionalist Wicca, and so it was a whole new ball of wax. But the person who was supposed to be teaching it didn't know any magic at all, but they could write a ritual, beautiful ritual. So we tried to incorporate that ritualization into what we were already doing. He wanted to have mass initiations where you invite everybody you know, and you'd invite everybody, and you would initiate everybody. And I went to an event one night, and he had like close to 60 people there to be initiated, people he didn't even know. And I told my wife, I said, I'm not going in there. So I took my happy ass home. And so later he asked why we didn't go, and I told him, and he said, well, we can do y'all separate and it'll be different. And I said, well, okay, let's do that.
All
so
right.
We had ours at the next full moon, and it was at a natural spring inside the spring house called Chick Springs in Greenville off Wadehampton Boulevard. And when we were in there, everybody was amming, and in the background, we could hear singing throughout the initiation. And so somebody went outside the house to look and see if there was any, and there wasn't. And it was not even a house. It was like a mound that was big enough for you to walk into and stand up, but just barely overhead. And then there was benches or whatever to sit down, and the well was in the middle. And so that's where we got our initiation, and we began to work our way up. There were people who got disillusioned in the way the group was run, and everybody left the group.
Okay.
Including myself. After a couple of months, he contacted us again, and he wanted to talk about all of that, why it didn't work and all that. And I said, well, I don't know. I couldn't tell you other than, and then I gave him my critiques. And then after a couple of months, he said, can we go through getting your initiations up, and I will turn the coven over to you? And I said, well, I didn't really want to run it, but okay. And so that's what happened, and we did, and we stayed, and we went through the ranks and got initiated up to our third, and then we became the priest and priestess of the group. Eventually, due to some irresponsible behavior, he ended up not remaining in the group, and so he went on his merry way. We decided that since now there wasn't a question about the legality of occult religions, so we thought, well, we'll go through this again. We will go ahead and charter as a Wiccan organization. So in 90, I think it was 90 or 91, we chartered as the first Wiccan temple and seminary in South Carolina. We did the paperwork on a Thursday or Friday night and blessed it and mailed it on whatever night that was, Thursday or Friday night. Monday in the mail was our charter. It had to go to Columbia, get checked, get approved, and sent back. And it was back on Monday. I do not know how that works. Time, space was out the window. So once we became an actual church, then, well, first of all, I would like to say I have never been in the broom closet. When I first started doing this, I just did it and just didn't worry about it. And we started having public ritual in my backyard in a neighborhood that had no fence, had no trees, had no blockage. You could see my yard from 3 streets, and the neighbors were not so thrilled. First of all, it was a mixed race neighborhood, and when they saw a bunch of white people in white robes, it really unnerved neighbors. So then we started trying to incorporate colors into our robes so that we wouldn't have a riot on the street over something that nobody understood what was going on. So that's when our very first open public ritual, we had not even got the circle cast and the cops showed up. So I thought, oh boy, this is going to be fun. So luckily, I had my charter on the altar, and I just walked to the front yard with the charter, and I said, could I help you? And he said, well, we got some calls. And I said, well, maybe this will clear it up. And I handed him the charter, and he read it, and he said, oh. And he just got back in the car and left. And I thought, well, that wasn't quite so hard, as hard as I thought it would be. But if I had not had it, I'm sure that could have not been so wonderful. But at that time, Greenville City and Greenville County both had an occult investigator. And I lived in the county, but I was what they call city annex. It was like the end of the street that I was on. One end was city, one end was county. So they both contacted us. They were interested in knowing more. So they came out and asked questions. They asked, could they come to a ritual? And we said, yeah. They asked, could they video the ritual and show it to their dispatchers and their officers? And we said, yeah. And then they asked for representatives of the temple to come to the law enforcement center and do a presentation. And so we said, yeah. From that point on, they supported us in everything we did. When the neighbors called and said, they're doing this, they're doing that, the neighbors would get a lecture on Wicca. If they called back a second time, the police did come out to their house and give them on Wicca. So the neighbors just gave up on it.
I love
and after
it.
they thought they'd done all they could do, I said, okay, now we can put up a privacy fence and plant some trees, but I didn't want to make it look like we were hiding. then
Right.
they'd think we had something to hide for. So we had bigger and more elaborate rituals and crowds, 60, 80, 100 people. It just kind of got crazy. But it was the only place around that was doing open public rituals, and we were doing it for all the Sabbaths. So the police got involved. They were supportive. And then I got a call from Greenville News, and they wanted to send somebody out to interview about the coven. And I thought, oh, Lord. The hair on the back of my neck goes up. I'm like, ooh, this is kind of scary. But I said, okay, all right. And the more I got to talking to the guy, I found out that he was Buddhist. He'd been in the South for a short period of time. The whole time he was here, people were always beating him over the coals over not being a Christian. Where do you go to church? And he said it was refreshing to be able to write a positive story about something that wasn't an organized mainstream religion. And that was what his zeal was about. And so he came out, he took pictures of us in robes, horns, anthems in hand, and gave our real names. It was kind of enlightening. But in addition to that, we told them about our dealings with the police and things like that. Well, they contacted the police and got a really positive story from the police. They also contacted Clemson University and talked to a history professor that did a class called The Witch Craze of the 16th and 17th Century. And then he contacted a religion professor at, I think it was USC Columbia, and they had nothing but good things to say. Not about us particularly, because they didn't know us.
Right.
But from the historical part of what we told them, they were supportive of that. And so they wrote a really, really big article. It was on 3 different pages of the Greenville News, and it started out on the front page of the Greenville News with pictures. And I went to work that next day, and
Lord.
where I worked, there was a newspaper box outside the door. And as I'm walking in to clock in, I see myself peeking out of the news box. I'm thinking, oh my God. I thought, how the hell am I going to deal with this? But I went on into work. I thought, well, here we go. Not one person all day long mentioned it, which I thought was really bizarre. They just smiled and nodded and never had any trouble there. But then we started getting, since we weren't in the broom closet to begin with, we thought, well, we'll just throw caution to the wind. So we started doing all kinds of stuff. We did an adopt a highway. We would pick up all the garbage, which is what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
But we wouldn't just do like you're supposed to do. We took all the garbage back to my house and we dumped it all in the circle. And the whole coven sat around like a bunch of vultures, and we picked through every piece of it, and anything that could be recycled or reused, we picked it out, and we sent maybe 4 or 5 bags out of 30 or 40 to the landfill. We were able to recycle the rest of it. Then we started doing in-house classes in addition to all the Sabbaths being open. And then we created a correspondence course. And then we created a newsletter. And we started selling it at the local Pagan bookstore. And then we started doing newsletter swaps with other newsletters throughout the country, and sold a few subscriptions through that. We joined this group called the Wiccan Pagan Press Alliance, which is like the Associated Press for pagan publications. Well,
Okay.
it was in the 90s. I don't think it's even there now. But anyway, that we got involved in that. Well, this was just more than my new job that I had could stand. And so I got a certified letter telling me that I couldn't come back to work because I had been put in a as needed basis position from my full-time position. And there was no explanation other than that I wasn't allowed on the premises until they called me. And now that letter came in the mail a day that had already gone to work. And so the supervisor pulled me off the floor and said, oh, I was working in a psychiatric hospital too.
Okay.
But anyway, they called me into the office and wanted to know what I was doing there. And I'm like, well, I'm here because I'm scheduled and I work here. And they said, so you don't know? And I said, I don't know what. And at that time, the door opened and somebody said, Ken, you got a phone call. So I went to the phone. It was my wife. And she said, you got a certified letter from the hospital. And I said, okay, well, what is it? And she said, well, I didn't open it. And I said, well, open it. And it said the same thing that they were telling me. And so I said, so what's this about? And she said, there's no explanation. So I went back in the office. I talked to the lady, and she wouldn't give me an explanation. But she said, are you wearing a pentagram right now? Which I was, but it was inside my shirt. I said, I am, but what's that got to do with this? And she just started hemming and hawing and stuttering. And I said, oh, that's what's got to do with this. And so I thought, wow. And so they said, but you can still work here, but you can only come in when we have an opening in the schedule and somebody needs replaced, or, there's a hole or there's some issue or whatever. And I'm like, okay. Well, she proceeded, after telling me that, to take my name out of the Rolodex on all the units so nobody could call. But luckily, I had enough friends and support in the hospital that they were calling me every day. I was getting overtime. I was there more than I would have been there if they had just left me the hell alone. And they were not happy with that, I can promise you. But it was their rule. And so then they started all this just playing head game, well, you have to do this if you're going to stay employed, and you have to do that, and just kind of making it difficult. And so I just played right along. And I happened to be talking to the lady from the Wiccan Pagan Press Alliance on the phone. And she said, well, something's got to be done. And I said, well, okay. I said, whatever that means. And I said, I agree with that. I said, magically, we're working on it. And she said, no. She said, we're going to get this done right now. She said, write up this whole story and send it to me. I'm like, okay. Well, I did. And I put the people in the administration's name, phone number, address, and the whole kit and caboodle of all of it. And so she made that into an article, and she sent it and had it attached to every pagan publication in America and Europe, and requesting letters of support be sent to me and letters of complaint be sent to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and to the hospital. And they said any of the letters they want to send a copy of me or her, send to me or her, that we were welcome and accepting of that. Well, the letters started coming, hundreds and hundreds and thousands of letters. They started coming from everywhere. And the people at the hospital were kind of getting a little freaked out by that. But the fact that all these letters kept coming and I kept being at work every single day, at least when I was working my schedule, I was working second shift. So the administration didn't have to see me. But they were calling me in on days and all kind of stuff. And they were having to see my mug up and down that hall, and they were just freaking out. So there were some issues at the hospital, and they were possibly losing some accreditation from some other bad business decisions they were making. They actually came out and repossessed the medicine and the milk. It was bad. So in the midst of that, I got a call and they said, we've seen the error of our ways and we're going to let you come back to work. And I said, oh, really? But they were going to take me off of the adolescent unit because I was such a terrible influence, in their words. And they were going to let me work on the adult unit. Well, on the adult unit is where all the stink was being stirred. And I told them, I said, well, something in my spirit tells me that that's not a wise decision, so I'm not going to budge. When you can give me my job back, I'll take my job back, but I don't want to work somewhere else. And this was like I think this was on a Wednesday or Thursday. It was mid to latter part of the week. Well, I refused to go back to work other than just working like I was working because God has told me something was not right. And sure enough, on Monday morning, Greenville News had a story that they had lost their accreditation on the adult unit and they'd laid off all the staff. And if I went and took that job on Wednesday or Thursday, then I would have been out the door with all of them and they would have had nobody to question anything about. So they were not happy with that. And so I went to, at the chance that I wouldn't get to work, I went to the unemployment office to get a record of not being officially full-time anymore. And they sent them a list of reasons why I shouldn't be able to get my unemployment.
Right.
But it was mainly a list of days that I had been absent. And then they said there was insubordination. They could not tell the people who I was insubordinate to. So I called them to find out. Well, they couldn't tell me who I'd been insubordinate to. And so when they told me that list of days, I told the lady, I said, can I have a list of that, a copy of that? And she gave it to me. And I said, and in return, I'm going to give you a list of the reasons why they told me that I couldn't come back. Well, there was a list of days, but it was a different list of days. And there was a couple of other things I don't remember right off the top of my head. That's a long time ago. But anyway, that they couldn't prove, and it was just crap. And so I said, let me go back to work the next time I go to work and do some homework. And because it was a long-term facility, the people there were there sometime for months or years. So I could go pull up the charts, and if I had a patient that I was caring for, I charted on that patient. So I went back to the charts and I looked at my list of days, both lists, and there was one of those days off of both those lists. There was only one day that I was actually out of work. So I wrote all that down and I called the lady at the unemployment office and I said, well, I just did some homework on the charts of the patients and all those days on that list except one, I charted on patients. So I was not absent. And I said, and they can't tell me who I was insubordinate to either. And I said, and when I pushed the issue about the days being different, they said they couldn't tell me because they never pulled my days. So if they didn't know when I was there or not there, how can you fire somebody and report it to a state agency if you ain't never pulled the days? So, of course, I got approved, but of course, I never had to use it because I was up there every day. And so I would have to tell them, I can't come every day. I can't come 2 or 3 shifts a day. There was a couple of times that I worked first shift, second shift, third shift, first shift, half of second shift, without going home, without leaving, without clocking out, took a 4-hour break and got back up and worked night shift. And they didn't have a problem with that. And I know that's illegal.
Yeah.
But They were all well and good with it because it suited their need, and they didn't have to officially have me on the books. So then, after getting all those letters, I decided to go to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and dump all this information on them. And so I gave them the double copies of the 2 sets of dates and the information that I found out about that. And then they contacted them, and they got a third list, completely different list with way more dates on it. And so the woman basically told them that they have the other 2 lists and that she knew they were full of crap. So they wanted them to send a copy of where they had pulled the records. Well, they told them right out, plain out, they hadn't pulled the record. Nobody knew. Nobody even checked. And the really crazy thing about all of this, South Carolina is a right to work state. You can fire somebody and just say, don't come back and leave it.
Right.
But
North Carolina's the same way.
I was also in my 90-day probationary period. Again, another reason they could have just let me go. But they chose not. They chose to do it the evil, nasty way, and it paid off for me. Eventually, the woman who did all that got found out she wasn't even qualified to do her job in Boston. And then they finally said, okay, we're going to let you come back to work. And I just laughed and I said, so what kind of bullshit are you trying to pull this week? I said, because you're going to have to go a ways to beat my last one. And she said, no, you can work anywhere, any unit, any shift, any time. Just tell me. And I said, oh, well, that's different. I said, well, y'all hate me. I said, I ain't real thrilled with y'all. I said, let me work 16 hours on Saturday, 16 hours on Sunday. You never have to see me. I never have to see you. And this will be a moot point from now on. And they were all in agreement. Well, I was kind of surprised, but I went back and there were no issues. I thought, oh, well, this is different. And everybody was nice and supportive. And so there was a nurse on the adult unit and a nurse on the adolescent unit who decided they wanted to get married and they wanted a medieval Renaissance type of a hand fasting and wanted me and Barbara to do it. I'm like, okay, well, that's fine. And so they gave me the date and the time where to go and whatever. And so we went and I got out. I had my little robe on, my little horns and my little podium so we could go out. It was at the top of a mountain in Pickens County. Somebody had bought it and was building a huge house. And until they got the house built, they were living in a camper trailer. And they were going to let them use the land to have their hand fasting. And so I said, okay, well, that's cool. And so we showed up and we got her out there and we got out to the clearing where the hand fasting was. And guess what? They had invited the entire administration of the entire hospital that I had just gone through all that crap with. And here I show up in my red robe and my horns. And you could have just about had to pick their jaws up off the ground. But they made pictures and they shared them at the hospital. And everybody at the hospital was my best buddy after that. And I worked there for about 4 or 5 years after all that. Never had a problem. Everybody was so supportive. And it was just a huge blessing. It was a headache to get through, and it took me a little over a year of fighting with them. But we won. I mean, not me, the person, but the cause of our people pushing forward during time of adversary. And so it was a huge blessing. But it also was a big learning opportunity. And it pushed my faith to a point that I don't think there's nothing that we can accomplish. That's when we got involved with being an activist in the community, trying to to help other people. There was a lady who was in a car wreck. She was from somewhere in North Carolina, and she was in a car wreck, and she was visiting her parents, and she was a student. She was a Wiccan student, but she was a student in college too. And so she had all those books with her. Well, her car was totaled. And so they took all her belongings back to Margaret Pardee Hospital in Hendersonville. And the people there had to go through her stuff, make sure there wasn't nothing dangerous or nothing, she could hurt herself with, or somebody else could, anything of value that might get stolen. And in that, they found all her witch stuff, at which time they threw all her shit in the floor and they stopped treatment, other than to give her what was specifically ordered by a doctor in their face. They didn't do anything. They would not bathe her. They did not comb her hair. They did not get the blood out of her hair. They did not get the glass that was still in her scalp. Nobody knew she was there but the staff, because her family hadn't even been notified yet. She was getting calls in her room saying, you're going to hell because you're a devil worshiper, and that this would have never happened to you otherwise. And so they gave her lots of grief, and they wouldn't do anything. So we gathered a few people, and we went up, got her cleaned up, got her straight, started a letter writing campaign to the hospital there, and also letters to the editor of the Hendersonville paper. Well, they printed the letters to the editor, and it stirred a stink. And Pardee Hospital contacted us and was very apologetic, and they really turned around the way they treated her. And she currently is a voodoo priestess up in Charlotte. So
Okay.
still have contact. She's a great lady. And but that was like our first time of like being active for something other than just self-preservation.
Right.
And but anyway, that's kind of got me started. We started trading on that Wiccan Pagan Press Alliance. We started trading newsletters with 35 or 40 other organizations that were putting out newsletters. So we were offering our information for free, and they were offering their information. And it just helped to solidify our stance and give us a little extra information, since we were still building our practice and understanding. That was in Ravenscry Temple that all that happened, but that was what it was chartered under, the temple name, but the coven name was Hearthstone. So a few years later, I guess mid 90s, we went to the first ever Blessed Be Meet Me in DC pagan gathering that was on the mall in DC and at the Jefferson Memorial. And we made the trip. We had a student that had started her own group that was up there, and we went to meet them, and we all was going to the event. Well, the day we got ready to go, Barbara, my wife, got so sick she couldn't even get out of bed. She couldn't stand up. She didn't want to talk. She had a fever. She lost her voice. She was sick as a dog. And so I said, well, I'll stay here with you. And she's like, no, go ahead. She said, it's better if you go. So I went, and during the day, the goddess visited her and made her feel better, and made her get up out of the bed, and made her get a notebook. And she said, okay. Oh, well, first of all, I guess a couple of years, or 3 or 4 years into the Hearthstone group, Barbara decided that, well, Barbara and I together decided we were the only group that was doing anything public, and nobody else was doing it. And so everybody who wanted to be a student, or everybody who wanted to come to a ritual, they kept showing up at our house. It was more than we could do. And so we decided if we shut down the coven completely, they'll have to sink or swim. And so that's what we did, and that's what they did. And that's what we left it as. And so we went to this event with one of our people's groups.
Yeah.
And but anyway, she was woke up. She was made to feel better. She was made to write this long page. I mean, probably 20 or 30 pages. She just wrote and wrote and wrote the whole day while we were gone. And it was going to be a change in the way we practice, a change in the name of the group, a change in, well, we had always done our Sabbats and Esbats like most people do.
Right.
And then, so in the Revelation, she was told that we do moon rituals for lunar connection and the solstice and equinoxes for solar connection, and the others are for agricultural or earth connection. And so in her, I guess, speaking with the goddess, she was told to align her lunar, since the moon was connected to the earth, to align the lunar alignment with the agricultural alignment.
Mm-hmm.
So during the first part of the year, we would do new moons. And then, say, from Imbolc to Beltane, we did new moons. And from Beltane to Samhain, we did full moons.
Okay.
And then from Samhain to Imbolc, we did dark moons. And that was a pretty important thing, and it altered our magic quite differently because you were connecting the moon with all the daily mundane things you were doing in alignment with the agricultural cycle or the earth cycles, which was pretty. But anyway, it was a whole bunch of different stuff, and the name of that group was told to her, and she had to look it up to figure out what the heck it was. It was Tuatha de Kirshi.
Mm-hmm.
And as she's writing, she keeps trying to say, but I don't have a group. We don't have a coven. I don't know why we're doing this. And Goddess told her, you just get it ready because the students will be there in the spring and you have to be ready. And that was kind of interesting, but she's like, okay, well, we'll do this. So she got everything together, and randomly on that next spring equinox, come a star, there was a tap, tap, tap on the door. And it was somebody that I had not seen in probably 10, 15 years. Showed up with their wife that they newly got married to, who was having a crisis of faith. And he told her, he said, well, this is where I got help when I was having a crisis of faith. And so, and the only reason he had not been involved in the coven previously, because when I first met him, he was like 16. And so too young. And the parents certainly wasn't going to approve it. But anyway, he went to service and he left the state and he was here and there and everywhere. We kind of lost track. And but then when the time come, he brought her and it was on a star, just like the goddess did. And so the temple was again open. Now, we didn't do completely open rituals then because we didn't want to get all that started. but we did have, people we knew we would invite, and continuing to deal with the community more, but like I said, not having open rituals. And at that point, my wife had gotten to an age where she was ready to crone. And her belief had always been that when you crone, you still can teach, you still can offer your services, but you are not a mother, you are not in that role anymore. So she said that she wanted to step down as priestess. She would only be like a resource person, support person, that kind of thing. And we left the members to do whatever they wanted to do, either continue the coven or practice individually or whatever, which gave us a little bit more time to do other things. And so, again, we began dabbling in other community projects and stuff. There was a Pagan Pride Day that had been run by several different groups over the years, several different incarnations of PPD. And we would go and we would volunteer and do things. And, she'd teach a class, or, we would help gather information packages to make for every person that came, or just different things that we would do. And so we did that. And then a lot of volunteer work. And then in 2010, Barbara passed. And at the time, we weren't involved in any organization. There wasn't a current PPD going at that time. Well, there was one. I'll take that back. There was one. But the person that was doing it was very shady, and there was a lot of question about it. And she ended up shutting it down, absconding with the money, absconding with the vendor list. The whole thing was gone. Yeah. And there was another priestess that decided she wanted to try it. And so she started trying to put it together. And they said, well, the last person kind of did their own thing. So there's nothing for us to pass on to you. No money, no list, no nothing. So the only way you can do it is literally start from scratch. And so she started doing that. And she asked me, would I help out and be on the board? And I agreed. And so she gathered a whole board, and we started creating a current PPD. First was in 2011, and we had it at the Greenville UU Fellowship. After getting involved with that, being on the board and helping plan things, I also made a contact on Facebook, of all things, of an organization called Greenville's Interfaith Forum. And it was for people meeting from all different religious backgrounds and faiths. And so I contacted them and talked to them. They'd never had any dealings with pagans or Wiccans or none of that stuff. But they welcomed me as the first one, and they allowed me to get on the board and help make decisions. And so I worked with them for several years. Eventually, that organization, a lot of the founding members kind of got too old to do whatever, and the group was a little bit outdated. They were not very computer friendly, and so there wasn't a whole lot done in order to build like a new generation of people to kind of run the show. So eventually it folded. Now, and I cannot think of the name of it, but I've recently, like in the last year, come across another more pagan inclusive interfaith organization, but I have not had too many irons in the fire to actually get involved with that one at this point. But it is on my to-do list. Let's see. So after we did PPD for a few years, every once in a while a question will come up, or there'll be some kind of little something that you need some support from the organization. And so we would try to do that and go through the right protocol or channels, and never got a call back, never got an email back, never got a phone call back, never got a Facebook message, never got anything. They'd say, you need to do this. And then that would be the end of it. And you'd try to find out or get clarification. No response. And so we decided, well, if we're just going to be flying by the seat of our pants and making it up as we go because nobody's helping us, then we might as well just be doing it. Because the way it goes now, they tell you how far apart you have to be from the next person that's doing one, and you have to only have it between Mabon and Samhain, or just all harvest related, and that's the only time. And there's just all these rules. And the way that they originally told us to do all our paperwork, since we were under their charter, we had to do all our paperwork for finances and send it to them. And we did every year from 2011 to 2019, or whenever we stopped dealing with them. And the reason we stopped dealing with them is because they said, oh, by the way, we're changing that. We're not going to handle that anymore. You're going to have to do your own. So I said, okay. And then I read further down. Then they said, retroactive to day one, you have 30 days. I'm like, wait, what? So they had all my records, and they weren't going to do anything with them. And they wanted me to figure it out. And so the board sat down and decided maybe we ought to just get our own charter and do our own thing, and have something that if we're going to be crawled on the carpet over, it's going to be because we made the decision, not because somebody said do it, and then you do it, and then they wouldn't contact you back. Because when it all happened, I contacted them, and the lady who was doing the group contacted them, and nobody would get back with us. They wouldn't give us no explanation. I couldn't get no information about getting my paperwork back. I couldn't do nothing. Nobody would tell me nothing. And so we just decided we'd start, and that's where we come up with Carolina Pagans with a Purpose. Because also you have to answer to them where you can pull board members or different things from according to the original agreement. But now we thought, well, why don't we just make it more inclusive, and rather than just say South Carolina Upstate Pagan Pride Day, let's make it Carolina Pagans with a Purpose. Well, I didn't come up with that by myself. A group of us threw out ideas, but it's something that would be more inclusive, since we had a lot of friends and people we knew in North Carolina that also were involved, and people that wanted to help, and people that we wanted their help. And so we thought, well, we'll just be more inclusive. And if we're going to stand on it, we'll stand on it alone. And so that's what we did. And we kind of broke ties with PPD. I don't have any ill feelings about them. I learned a lot going through all that. And so now we're kind of doing it on our own. And so that's one thing. And in the process of all that, Lady Crow Moon, and well, first of all, when my wife passed, we had been building a rock pile for about 3 years, because when we moved from our old house in 2016 to our 2006 to our new house, we left a huge stone circle, and way too much to move. And also we were going to allow covenanters to still live in the house. Okay. And so we came here, and I decided that I was going to have a circle built here, if for no other reason, just so Barbara would have a circle, because that was her meditated thing. She would go to the circle and walk the circle, sometimes for hours, as her meditation. And so we started gathering. So every time we'd have a dinner party or a birthday party or any kind of anything here, I would tell everybody that you have to bring at least one rock, because we're going to build the circle. And for 3 years, we gathered rocks. And so we set a date that on October 3rd of 2010, we were going to all gather and build the circle. Huge stack of rocks. And people were still bringing them. And so on October 1st, Barbara died unexpectedly. Mm-hmm. And on the 3rd, it was difficult, but the plan had been set, and we built that circle. And there was lots of weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth and crying and snotting, and just, it was a mess for almost everybody there. The energy was so skewed that we had two people with compasses trying to figure out where the points were. And the compasses were just totally just spinning. And so we just had to, I said, well, over there is where the sun comes up. That's all I can tell you. And we did it by that because none of the compasses would work. And we built it. One of the most touching things I saw is little children bringing their own stones. And a crippled lady who couldn't walk asked her family to physically lay her on the ground so she could place her stone so they could pick her back up and put her in a wheelchair. Very powerful.
Mm-hmm.
But the circle was built, and I asked the community to help me to bless it with energy, all kinds of energy. So I put out a call on Facebook that said that it was going to be a community circle, and I wanted everybody to use it. And so I began to actively seek people from all different faiths to come. So we had a Druid ritual and a Celtic ritual and a Norse ritual and a Dianic ritual and a Voodoo ritual and a Native American ritual and just everything. So I wanted it to be blessed for an entire turning of the wheel. So after those first 8 Sabbaths, I still had people contacting me. So I'm like, okay, well, that's fine. And so we kept doing it. So the second year went by, and then the third year started, and then it started getting less and less people that were, contacting me. So Lady Crow Moon and I sat down and talked, and she was not running a group at that time. She was kind of on sabbatical. And so we decided that not to have a coven, but just to provide worship for people who didn't have a place. So we decided to start doing at the community circle all the Sabbaths. Again, all the Sabbaths were open, and we would provide ritual. And also, because I've got room here, we started doing our Carolina Pagan with a Purpose meetings here sometime if we didn't have a place. We'd do fundraisers here. And so we were just getting more and more involved in the community. And then the community circle brought people from all different faiths and all different facets of paganism, made lots of good connections with people, created a unity event where we made a giant dream catcher, and we asked people from all these faiths to come and bring their trinkets or amulets or feathers or stones or jewelry or whatever, and we were going to weave it into the web. And it was about, I guess the circle was probably 4 or 5 foot across. And so all this stuff was woven into it. And then it was tied to a rope, and the rope was thrown up in the tree, and we pulled it up so the unity web hung over the center of the circle, and it had all these things in it, all this energy. And then we did energy raising and imbued it with that as well. And then after a year or two, we took it down. We took all the stuff off. We put it in a bag, a leather pouch. We asked for, put another call out, had more unity, another unity ritual. And we had people come, and we did that again. And we reignited that unity community feeling. And after we got all the new things attached, then we attached to the bottom of it the leather pouch with all the original stuff in it. And then after another year or two, it started looking kind of peaky, so we did it a third time. So the purpose is we just going to keep doing it as long as we need to do it. And we can have a peace pole where people have, painted the word peace in all these different languages and just trying to bring people together. Of course, the human element, there's always going to be people that push against it, but you can't win in a situation like that by becoming equally aggressive or equally confrontational. So we just have tried to incorporate as much as we can into making sacred space what it's supposed to be. And we have a lady who has agreed to do the Astar ritual. I know she practices Celtic Wicca, and I also know she practices McFarlane Dianic. And so I don't know what her ritual is going to be like. She has not gotten back with me with all the details, but she's wanting to do it and have some kids' activities and stuff like that, which we've done before, and it's great. And so I'm looking forward to it. So my goal is just to try to further paganism in whatever way I can. It's not like I'm doing nothing great, but I'm just hanging on, doing what I can, and planting seeds where I can. And like a lot of this work, you don't always know the repercussions of things that you've done, and it shows up much later. I've been blessed to see that on a number of occasions, going all the way back to getting the house, all the way back to when I bought my house here. I bought it completely delusional. First time I bought a house, I did not know. I got a call and said, okay, we're going to closing. All you got to do, and she told me what I had to bring to the closing. And she said, and don't forget your down payment. Well, I had already forgot my down payment. I said, I had bought a car 3 weeks before. I had no cash. I didn't have $10. And I thought, how the hell am I going to put down a down payment on another house? And eventually, I decided I would contact. I know that you get a penalty, and I know you have to pay it back, but I thought, well, I'll get some money from my retirement savings from work. And so I called work, and it was like 3 days before I had to actually take the money with me. And so I called work and I talked to my benefits person, and they said, well, you have to pay it back. You get a 20% tax penalty if you take it out, and you got to pay it back. And she told me all this stuff, and I'm like, ugh. And I said, well, I guess I have to do what I have to do. And she said, what are you doing with the money? And I told her, and she said, well, that's under a different clause. She said, for deaths in the family, kids going to college, buying a new house, things like that, you can get it without the penalty and without paying it back. And I said, well, that's what I want to do. I said, what I got to do? And she said, well, I just got to fill out some paperwork. And I said, how much can I get? Because I'm trying to figure where I'm standing on having to have money in 3 days. And so she said, well, hold on. And she said, I can't tell you right now. I'll have to send this in and you have to let you know. And I said, well, can you let me know by the end of the week? And she said, well, I hope I can. And so I think it was the very next day, she called me and she told me that it was approved and that I could get X amount of dollars. And when she said it, I knew that it was right. I knew that it was a purposeful thing. It was within $10 of what I needed to pay my down payment. And I thought, well, yeah, I can't get no better clarification than that. But again, it put me to a place where I don't believe there's nothing that can't be done. 2 years ago at PPD or CPP or whatever, there was a hurricane coming up through South Carolina and was going to hit on the day of the event, and it was going to hit Greenville. And we just decided to pray that that was not going to be an issue. And we didn't get the first drop of rain. We didn't get the first wind. It just turned and went back out to sea, and nothing was done. And it was perfect. And everybody else was freaking out. But we just pushed right on through. God is just blessed. And at the end of the day, just before we started our musical guests, which we usually do at the end of the day, at the end of the day, right before the music started, there was a huge rainbow over the altar. Over the stage. And so I knew that was the message. We survived it. And so Goddess has been good. I've been doing this since 82. That's, Lord, that's a long time. But it's been a blessing. Not always easy, but it's been a blessing. And I've gained so much spiritually, emotionally, and through my friendships. I appreciate you talking with me. And
oh no, I appreciate you coming on. I'm so scared that this history I was raised on is going to be lost.
Yes,
so I want to get it somewhere where, like, this is what we did. These are the people who taught me, and the things that y'all taught me, I couldn't put a price tag on them.
Well, I've always appreciated the connection that we've all had, and Lord Man for helping to facilitate that, and it's just been a huge blessing all the way around.
It has, and trust me,
most important people in your life. Sometimes you don't even know why.
Nope.
But there they are, right when you need them.
Again, Lord Lugh, thank you for being here today.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate you taking the time and talking with me.
Thanks for listening. Join us next week for another episode. Pagan Coffee Talk is brought to you by Life Temple and Seminary. Please visit us at lifetempleseminary.org for more information, as well as links to our social media: Facebook, Discord, Twitter, YouTube, and Reddit.
We travel down this trodden path, a maze of stone and mire. Just hold my hand as we pass by a sea of blazing pyres. And so it is the end of our days, so walk with me till morning breaks. And so it is the end of our days, so walk with me till morning